What books are you reading, Derek? Anything?
I just set down Punk Science.
Oh, yeah. How was
Mm,
that? That's
Really
pretty interesting.
fascinating. Yeah.
Well, let's say there are all sorts of stream of consciousness insights into existing forms, the way it seems to me. Now, when we were talking about Bitcoins, was because Spiro kind of was floating past and he was involved with Bitcoins, and then there were different levels. So he introduced the possibility, and it was Raphael's birthday coming in, and I felt we maybe give him some Bitcoins and then find a dopey way of sneaking into that world. But it wasn't for me to, and I was to like create a spark in something where then Mary then just went in and instantly was able to do something. Where if you wanted to do something, she can do. She's capable of doing it. So then immediately there was something set up, but it wasn't me setting it up in that way. It was me kind of as we one day were deciding here when we were talking, and Spiro and others were here, and they were talking about a place for rent, and the guy's an artist who has it for rent, and it's a cool space. And so I said, okay, let me give the guy a painting that will pay for 4 months rent, and we'll bring all this stuff over there, and we'll hang out and bring some couches there. You can do some teachings there, or yoga teachings, and we'll just do 4 months of hanging out, and not a store per se, but things was for sale if they wanted. But we got rid of all the clutter in the house, but it wouldn't be clutter in the store. It would be very cool things, you know. So I said, okay, we can do that in 1 hour. Boom, all of a sudden, by 4 months of the thing. But when we got there, it wasn't the right place. The space was, he lived next door, and we felt we would rather have had the whole space. But you saw that somehow a moment of being into it can just open up a reality where it's not literally a business, it's not literally a store, it's a hangout, which is what your business is, what your work is your life is your work, not your job. But it does seem that when a job literalizes, the job becomes you in a way that you need it and is dependent on it and is fear, and then a structure and a historical framework grow around it, which are part of the systems that you're in. There are the systemic feelings that come with the turf that you step in, just like if you step into an air-conditioned room and all of a sudden it's cool. Once you enter into a corporate structure, like air conditioning, it becomes normal thinking that way. And making a buck as a primary goal becomes normal. So it normalizes what is subtly a dehumanization. As you continue in, because you'll be rewarded in the future, we're kind of surrendering your present towards a future happening. And so that dialogue normalizes something that was saying, well, hold it. We don't read the fine print in the contract. That's a contractual life. But if in fact you're leading a more of a creative life where there's some depth in the experience for you, if you're into something, it's because there's a feeling attached to it. There's a relationship, there's a structure around it. And it's not so much based on a continuum, it's based on it kind of being true in some way. And so as I was looking at this last few days with Mary, then going to New York, and the shift where I've premised, now it has many levels of philosophical experience in it, but I've premised that the relationship with Mary allowed me to assume an identity in a circumstance, as long as there was a true feeling or a true invitation in some way, that was experiential. But that my relationship was also when that shifted, if that shifted, if the thing that said, hey, baby, said, get lost, then you experience a death while you are alive in some way. Is this too out of it, kind?
No.
So then I've been experiencing myself here in the last few days, not only absenting the things that Mary would do normally to look out for me, but also a kind of dialogue or a conversation with absence, which is very close to a conversation is normalized. That someone being in New York while we're in New Mexico is normalized. But it looks very close to say, the person has passed away or I have passed away and we're looking at from memory and you're looking, so we're actually looking at it from memory and this and that. If I'm lying in bed or I'm walking over here or we shared this or I see the dog's face or whatever, you see absence of Mary and presence of Mary simultaneously. And you see dimensions of the everyday of the moment that are kind of hidden in plain sight. And it's normal. And at the same time, it's almost complete fiction from my perspective. One little thing, one happening, one passing away, one this or that. But I also see that in the kind of relationship that it is, passing away is only an aspect of the experience, not the total. There's something released in the passing away that was happening normally, that distance was there, that people were on a trip, you didn't see them for, and it was normalized. But when they pass away, even though you hadn't heard from them for years, or this happened or that happened, somehow the story that you shared with them comes to mind. So you see that locked in a box of your being are a million stories yet to be unlocked. They need an incident or an experience or reflection where you see that time is different than just literal time, but that there's an experience waiting that unlocks something that you thought was in the past, but is in your present also. And I feel that you see then the person is living on many levels. And I even saw in one sense when the cancer was inherited, meaning that you find out 50 years later that your father or your mother had the same thing, not even similar thing, but around the same age in a similar circumstance or whatever, and you saw what you would call a holy shit moment. It's holy because it's a hidden, that you're carrying a story all along throughout your life. And the story was not about you, literally, your career, how you'll survive or what you'll do. But there was also other dimensions that were also happening in your life that you become aware of. And as I mentioned, then you become aware of something that you were born with. Even before you assumed an identity, this also came into the life with you. And there are moments when that cause a reflection, but the reflection is based on a sanity in you. Sanity not meaning literal sanity, meaning the capacity to see one's own life from the perspective of the energy viewing your life. Or to make it a bit weirder, the other side of the mirror looking into the story, you as the other side of the mirror looking at the literal you. And you see that your journey of the literal you has been to get in touch with this thing that exists a quarter of an inch away, supposedly in some Hinduistic lore, that it's always coexisting at a quarter of an inch away. And literally the premise of the perception of living and dying creatively, as one would have if you were a movie maker or even a music maker, you would have to come to one point where the observer or the creator of the one who observes the story and then assumes identity in the story has a space between themselves and the literalness of the story. And you see that that space is having a conversation with something else. And to be in that space is a privilege. But it also means that you assume identities in the story. You do not look for the job to make you. You do not look for this career move or that. You are. You assume the identity of the story, not for its literalness of continuing to exist, but for its creative elements. And I think that you return to the story of one's life, to its creative dimensions in the story. Meaning that I then sit and the absence of Mary, sure, take it easy, okay, how's everything over there? Here expands the view of the amazingness of a segue all of a sudden setting up this show.
Yeah, I was surprised to see him, but I forgot.
Okay. And that segue has somehow assumed watering everything. But then he's saying, hold it, since you have big pot plants like that, you have to watch out for people coming out here trying to steal things. So then we say, okay, what kind of, are we in a theater? Is it an actual world? What kind of world is 3 yelping dogs and 20 pot plants 10 foot high? Casino, okay. And it actualizes when, let's say, when Mary's here, it's normal.
Right.
And somehow it's still normal. And to me, it's still about the energy. And I see a segue transforming. But he sees a cool segue who's, okay, buying t-shirts with names on it or whatever. You know. So let's say I step into these worlds. So Bitcoin now comes our way, and then I hear, oh yeah, you have Bitcoin. And then I hear from our main Derek, oh yeah, we have Bitcoin. And then I hear from all these characters, yeah, we have Bitcoin, we've been doing So the presumption is you know what it is, but since you don't have the killer instinct, as I was just reading about this fellow Thiel, who owns, do you know Thiel?
Is it Peter Thiel?
Yeah, he's in New Zealand.
Hmm.
He practically owns New Zealand, they say, but basically, but he's also a Bitcoiner.
Yeah, or on the edge of technology, that, you know, I would say. I don't know a lot about him. I've heard maybe a podcast maybe a year and a half ago, something like that.
I have a premise of not that I have to believe in a system, but that basically there is enough to presume, like in the life that we're living, that there is, since it's not directly jobs or earning that way, that somehow you're creating a flow. And you may do a job, that's your call, but somehow there's a perception that happens to you that your life itself is created. So a job is not your life per se. A job is one of the creative expressions for you. That you may even see, I wonder if I can do this with a straight face, because you enter into the world from a different place where you're not a slave to it. But you also see the forms of addiction around need, that you need the job, you need this, and it is a balancing act. But it's only 1/4 of an inch away from being need. So then you see the creative compromises that one will make when something becomes a need. And they say, well, when it shifts from being a creative expression to the need of the literalness of the society, then surrenders to that. So let's say we're doing a balancing act because the world is always trying to force a literalness on a situation of continuity. When the continuity is no longer the case, it is now a creative challenge that has happened. When the continuity is interrupted, in some way it was written into the story karmically But when it comes still as a shock to the system, because what to do with the thing that we've created becomes the reality. In my own experience or whatever, I'll say, let's say the falling away of the feeling, then if I may imagine that Mary said, look, stop, no more, this, it's over, logically, then the question would be there, since I would be out of it in one sense, what to do with the house, what to do with this, what to do with that. Okay. And so there's a what to do that somehow doesn't exist as long as that affection exists, but maybe a primary question when that affection no longer exists. Then the literal survival seems to be the prominent feature. And what I'm seeing in many of the situations now that we're experiencing with some of the relationships that are breaking up, you see that survival element becomes very strong-minded, where it was, and you see why, because something happened where the feeling was lost, and then the survival of the self becomes predominant again. And so then everything that the person is doing is bugging you. You know, because there's a kind of continuity going. When it's when the person feels that they want a different life or a different scene, or they have a cooler scene waiting for whatever the story. But let's say when the feeling shifts, you're then in a theater that folks are kind of free to do, in some way to do, they're free to be cheesy. Somehow you're not free to be cheesy. That would, okay. But somehow with their normal cheesiness is normal. If you were cheesy, they would say, look, she's Shanti and she's okay.
Exactly.
So then let's say, let me step into that. Okay, let me say, do I want to be in that story?
Oh, my brother.
I said, well, I am in that story to some degree, because then in Segway watering the place and Segway, he set up the computer for a moment. Segway then all of a sudden has become a force in this place. They're talking recipes, he's talking recipes, but okay. So is it illusion?
Yes,
Or simply a fact?
it's all illusion.
It's all illusion. So let's say when you act on the illusion, meaning, for me, the illusion is the movement will say from the earth to the front room was a transformative movement in my dump world, but a normal movement. But one was a place of evasion. Smallest thing, like seeing something on the ground and picking it up if it was your place, but if it was someone else's, you wouldn't do it. So then you went from avoidance to where it naturalized just being part of a happening around you. And so you saw other stories in relationship to your own. And I felt just in that moment, it's just like you make friends somewhere and you start, when you see that person again, you see also the conversation you had with them in it. So it's not literally like friend literalness, but it's shared actually there's a sentiment in the body that's close to prayer, that comes close to a friendly conversation, as if you're talking to a God energy or an energy, or to yourself, or crying to yourself, or so basically the conversation with oneself with another is in fact still a conversation with oneself. I feel that that the self is not you literalized. It is a conversation with a quality in your being that's private. but it's not private when it comes to some levels of relationship or love affairs, then that dimension that is privately held is shared. And when it is shared around the feeling, there is a oneness that happens, or a merger, in a sense. Even in a friendship, if eyes meet, or accidentally, or whatever, there is, in fact, much of it is accidental in that state. It seems what seems accidental. You see later on in retrospect that even accidental occurrences are in fact have a little background to them. But you see that when the feeling shifts over anything, and the story literalizes, then the security is based in the continuity. Because then the doer comes in and says, where will I go? What will I do? How will we do this? So you see there's a lag time from the experience, which may be quite pure, the initial experience of, hey, baby, this is not, are you still into it? And what an impossible conversation. Into it is not only literally, but is evocatively, that the feeling gave you powers of expression, just as if you had a feeling for the character you played in the play that you're in. And you had a deep feeling for that character. The feeling gave you access to dimensions in the person's makeup. This is a remarkable life, isn't it, Erja? You feel like hanging around longer and as Erja, or do you want to try tap dancing?
What?
There's a sacred tap dancing I was reading about.
Oh, I don't tap dance then. That's
Well, it's not exactly tap, it's dancing around certain figures, and it reveals the message to you. But you don't need to do that. You're okay?
Well, I can always use these.
I just use those.
Yes.
I've been making that a main, are you still doing that? Are we forcing you to do that?
No, I'm doing it. I didn't do it today. I had a student early, so I didn't get a chance to, but most days.
Maybe we'll send some more pictures from the reflection in the mirror there. But it was pretty interesting. But I do it as a main thing now. But I've also developed other moves in them, but we will see. I enjoy it a lot. What do you think? What have you been doing, Erja?
Oh, I've been dancing, doing some yoga, climbing the
But
stairs.
have you done the clubs?
I can't do it at home because it's just, I'm afraid to break something. So I have to find a place by the creek. But I get the feeling of I've done the wrist, the way it becomes.
I would just carry around the apartment, just do like that with the clubs, just for your joints.
Yes.
You know, or you can just make some moves with the club, the 1 pound club, like that, you know. And also the one fellow that the figure 8 movements, where the head.
Oh, yes, yeah.
The basic one is the head going separate from the arms and the hips going separate, but that you really relax the body deeply, or you can strengthen it and make it shift. But then you start to do that with the clubs, where you make the figure 8s. And you can do really a lot with it, maybe for a few minutes of figure 8s, small figure 8s, big ones, small in front of you, where you're moving the body. So I've been developing something called the 8s or figure 8s. And even if you make it small, but your hips are also making 8s and your knees are making 8s, you know, in your mind's eye.
Yes.
And I'm doing that with my eyes, then just looking at the sky and trying to coordinate the sound with the planes that you hear flying overhead and things like that. You know, just coordinating the eyesight and the sound of it, you know. So I've been doing just simply that. But again, this week, as I was saying, in the absence and presence of Mary,
yes,
you saw almost experiencing it almost as if I was on the other, again, as I mentioned, on the other side of the mirror looking into the world, where a phone call allows me into the world, literally.
Yeah.
Because when I say why, I say because much of the world is weirdly weird. And anytime that people are so concerned about something, supposedly, and you grab your hand of it, it breaks apart in your hand. It's not having substance somehow. And so yeah, I'm seeing it still without the history so much, and it's more the mystery. And the mystery is if there's a hey baby invitation, there's a creative expression that comes out of it.
Yes.
But I am visiting the death, not as death so much, but as before death, a world before death, if you will, which has different times and different experiences to it, where you're not so literally relevant.
Yeah.
In fact, you see your presence is only an aspect of the life that you've lived. You'll see that the memory of you, even your kids coming home to your goneness and them looking through your things will be more you than you. They may not look through these things if you're in the way, but they may look through these things and say, holy shit, look at that. Oh, you understand? So let's say you, how many yous are you? There's the you that drives the story. But then somehow in the lifetime, the you that drives the story has to get out of the way of the story one way or another for the story to be seen. And that may be seen by your kid reading your letter. Your whole life into one dopey little letter. No Paris, no this, no that.
Right.
Hey, baby. Okay. So let's say a hey, baby allows you Boulder, Colorado. It allows you, let's say a hey, baby has allowed you an identity through all of these movies, and it's increasingly seen as this is another aspect of the movie. And that this process of the normalcy of absence of a love and the dialogue that happens in absence, while you also know presence is there. And a phone call away, and now literally this or that, but it's absence and presence simultaneously, because in the intimacy, the absence is there that gave kind of structure to the moment. And it shifts to dreamlike state. And I am exploring dreamlike state as another sense. I'll allow that fellow, but I had been doing that anyway. But then it's nice to see when it's a person confirming it, where that somehow when the journey becomes second nature to you now, then the time period of your body also shifts with your awareness. There is a circadian rhythm, but it's not only the medical or scientific circadian rhythm, there's a creative circadian rhythm. And it is akin to, if you were a doctor, you may go to sleep, but then you have to get awake if there's an emergency. So somehow the sleep cycle that you have is also based on the life that you're in. So when the life is in fact a creative one, then many of the cycles that we've experimented with, we are free to experiment. It's not just a given. So I feel that with that, then dreaming, if in a work ethic, then dreaming is a ball buster because it won't allow you to sleep as you wish. But in the creative world, dreaming is an aspect of the creative expression. Because it's not you, whenever there's a creative expression happening for you, it's diminished the you as being the owner of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever there is a creative aspect to your life, then you understand that you're speaking to an audience of sorts. Even if the audience is hidden, as it would be if you were in a play or in a movie, the audience is still hidden from you. But somehow measuring the response to you gives you a creative sense of something. So when that happens to you, you see that somehow you've entered into a life as a creative expression, not a literal one. But it literalizes as you wish. But you understand that there are other dimensions, that people in relationship, especially in the intimate relationship, see you from a different place. And you share an intimacy with them that is hidden in plain sight. And it's that shared intimacy that allows something to carry on. When that shared intimacy is shifted or affected, then the storyline in time starts to also resemble what is happening. So usually there's an event waiting when the situation is shifted. And it's still shifting in time, but it has shifted already. There's an event waiting that seems to be the cause of it. But I think it reveals a happening. And that somehow there is a true love that runs through the story. And somehow there's an authenticity that runs through one's life. And it may not be the structured authenticity or genuineness of the world, legally or literally, but that any life in relationship and reflected upon then starts to assume more of a creative dimension than a literal one. But it does seem then that until that happens for the person, one is preoccupied with survival as the main ingredient of life. And that one is taught, and that has reinforced, and that's the systems that we enter into. And survival means learning these systems of the social fabric that you're in. And increasingly, as you're in that, the social fabric you're in becomes your reality. And as it becomes your reality, the inner yearnings that are there for a genuine experience, not one manufactured, not one created, invented for a motive, but something that was hidden in accident, something that was hidden in unplanned, was something that they discovered later on with physicists too, that their desire and the experiment, their desire affected the experiment. The desire for a result affected the experiment. That they had to, in order for the experiment to be genuine, they had to create a baffle between the desire for the result of the experiment of a genuine exploration that somehow would reveal itself only to a genuine exploration. But if you laid knowingness on top of the experiment, then the knowingness would limit the experiment into a possessor. So let's see how that plays out. Let's say there are hidden experiences in the everyday world, and that they're waiting to be discovered. And when they are discovered, there's a reflection on one's story. But reflection on the story is different than knowing the story or owning the story. Reflection on the story doesn't own the story. So an event happens that throws you back 20 years and you see a scene from a different perspective that you kind of knew in your mind. And so let's say when it throws you back into that world, there is not a feeling ashamed of yourself, but enough shame feeling to say, hey, baby, I'm sorry, 100 years later. Because you see that you literalized the event in some way, and that people then were stuck in the story, not as a fault, that is the way the world works, it seems. stuck in the story seems to be normal, not some flaw. Because it requires something in the being to release the story from its being possessed or held. There's a hurt, and it's moving from the hurt. And so the hurt then, it looks like an issue that happened, but it seems that it's around the loss of a feeling, where then people acted normal, meaning that they weren't connected to each other in the same way any longer, and they were free to leave and come and go and do this. But let's say, in retrospect, you see something, and the seeing releases the story. But you see how built into the story it was, how karmically it was built into the story. But then there's an event in life that sees it dharmically, meaning not literal time, but sees the thread of your life being lived and sees the different aspects and different times for you and different expressions as you're floating through the life. And you see that the perception of it releases the story from the possessive, from the karma, from the continuity. And so you see you, me, we, it's all one kind of floating movement. It's all the connectedness between beings is more related to oxygen or normalcy of life around the trees, this and that. You see life being not restricted to the humanity story.
Right.
But you see life. And you see death in relationship to life, the normalcy of it. Because it's not, it looks like it's literalized as life that you pop into the world, and death when you leave, that same figure leaves, that's the measurement of you. But then you see it from a perspective that that's an aspect of the experience. But it would be as if two angels say, hey, you want to try living now in Pennsylvania? Okay, that should be weird. Let's give it a shot. And they pop up there and they say, what a weird scene we've stepped into. But pretty cool. We can work with this.
My two kids.
Mhm.
My two kids. My
Yeah.
two angels.
So let's say, look how weird it is for them. They say, you want to be born in Pennsylvania? I say, I don't know. Can't we be closer to California or something like that?
We're going to California in a month,
Yeah, I
by the
know.
way, for 3 days.
Well, that's what they had asked for before they arrived. Is they say, you had promised them California, but somehow. So let's say you're fulfilling the promise. So let's say it is in fact a movie, a creative act. And let's say all the experiences that you have in it would be almost as if you had directed it or written it, what to do in this place, how to do that, because somehow you can't hurt anyone. And because of that, they have somewhat of a limit of hurting you. They may try, but somewhat. You've held on to it pure. You want the job? They couldn't have run away with you. So somehow.
I'm feeling more and more. You know, Rod's dad passed away last week.
Oh no, I didn't know that. So how was that then?
I wasn't really involved in any of it, and I think he had pretty much. It was happening all summer, so I think Rod had pretty much come to peace with it by the time it happened.
Yeah. But it freed the story?
I think the story was freed because his dad talked about that event when he was starting to lose, his normal consciousness. So he just talked to Rod about everything at one point. So,
no, that gave them maybe a break between them each,
yeah,
you know. So let's say the losing control of the story, allowed one to come from a different place. And you saw the whole weirdness of it, at the same time that you hate something, you love something, at the same time you know, there's a simultaneity written in the story. You see that happening in the church there, where
Yeah.
you see at the same time that they have a fight with the sexuality and they have to organize it. At the same time, you see the repression of it. Did they have a conversation 1,000 years ago and say, look, well, what do we do around sexuality and sensuality? Then did they all get together and say, look, you can have affairs amongst yourself, or you can fall in love with each other's devotion, maybe, and you know, and there's but it can't be revealed to the world. And they say, because what does have? Because it has to look like this. And you say, no, people don't do this that well. Because it's not up to them. There's something in their brain that's looking. There's something in the being that's looking. Now they think it's looking for sexuality, but it's also looking for something true. It's obscured around the sexuality, but it comes out of the. I say, no, but what is the thing? I said, no, love comes out of the innocence of the experience, where it may be simple togetherness that becomes love making. But it's love making, not relief of loneliness, not relief of this or that or the story. So there's a difference between parallel stories that are being lived. There is the story of survival that it becomes. But in the story of survival, there's always an aspect of the being that is looking and searching and can't be satisfied by the survival alone. So then they try to enliven the circumstance, but something has shifted. You have a relationship to something genuine in yourself. That's not, and so the falling out and this and that is not some only because something psychological is taking place. The falling out is because it's falling out.
Mhm.
And you see, something is for it, but still the desire to love, the desire to be in love, the desire to experience that is still seeking. At the same time, it's in continuity. So without ever, I don't know, it's something that can be addressed until it's lost or looked at, because the minds that look at it have to be free from the story to some degree and see that they've had an experience that they've shared deeply. And they've experienced what it means to be in the world, literally. And so you see what it means to be in the world is that most situations are living in repression.
Yeah.
Repressing and suppressing the senses, and the survival aspect being the dominant aspect. So when the survival aspect is, then you can see that there are some making fortunes while millions are going without a life at all, you know, and the whole structuring and restructuring of it all. But one thing is missing is that somehow they made a movie of the feeling, but then they can tell the feeling as this or that. So somehow the human dimension is being lost in the expression. And there's a longing for it that runs through the story. And I feel that the more that you look at from the other side of the mirror, without the history of it, you see the yearning running through the life form itself. Not as some kind of crazy sentiment, but running through your life in dreams, running through your life in hidden thoughts and in your aloneness, you see a yearning. And the yearning is no longer psychologically organized. It has almost a relationship to an accident out in the world. That there's a dialogue to the mystery and the history by having a conversation. And the conversation sees you and you see it. There's a dialogue going on. And somehow, when that becomes apparent to you, it's your call. Do you want to carry on with it? It's not, yes, I want to live, or do, I'm saying, but do you see the juggling act of living and dying happening simultaneously? And it has elements of even watching something on Amazon or Netflix. Do I want to spend an hour or two watching this? Will I have something that speaks to me? So you see even that kind of weird choices about creatively what to look at, where to go, or to take a walk or whatever, is in fact choosing a kind of living, the smallest thing. The idea to hang around for 2 hours or to take a walk tomorrow or next week you'll do this, you see that something in you is agreeing to plan time. And you'll see for some of us, we're not planning time so much in the future. We've confined any plans that we would have to maybe a month and a half or so. Okay, as to doing this or doing that. Even Mary's going to New York is 12 days or so. Okay. So it's a kind of more of our dialogue, experiencing the absence and the present. And
Tico's music school they gave us the schedule for the entire year and asked if we had any conflicts. I was like, are you kidding me?
Well, at least they're predicting what the year is going to be. But it seems to me if this year coming has been a reflection of the year, is how long has it been now, Derek? What's the length of time that we've been in this thing flying overhead?
I mean, it depends on the start date that you choose.
About a year and 7 months.
A year and 7 months.
That's right.
And has
5 months. March,
how's
no.
the
7
horizon look? So now Mary flew to New York. Okay, and she's walking around New York, and she went down there downtown, and it was really crowded, and everyone seems to be okay with it. They just survived this major hurricane or whatever they just had. They're
Yes.
on top of it, you know. So it's an interesting time to be there. And the people in the building, I guess the building is recovering. They must have been down for a while
Oh,
with electricity and stuff like that there.
wow.
So interesting experience. What do you think? That New York is just New York. Was it New York when you went there, Kai?
Yeah, it was before all that though, and before the vaccine mandate, so it was pretty okay.
When you went there with the kids recently,
Mhm.
so it was okay for you?
Mhm.
I mean, but did it look changed out there, or is this impacting in the world?
It didn't, no, it really, it's funny. People just act the same as far as I can see.
So it seems to be something like that, or they're acting like how they act, and well, it's all interesting for me to go out into the story somewhat for a moment and see how it rides or how it flies. But esoterically, meaning that I still feel that I'm assuming an identity when I go out there that will navigate through the social norms, but that there is a thread that is running through the story that is making it more of a movie than it is literal life. Even as you're walking through the dopiest scene or the common everyday, or you walk through a mall there, or you I'm doing nothing. I only go out in those days where these guys invite me, but I'm basically doing nothing. Now, who wrote Doing Nothing? I think Stephen wrote Doing Nothing, but before then, it was the original understanding in the perception that you were doing nothing, that doing was only an aspect of our life. And that became the predominant one in a little society, the doer. But then you saw that there were dimensions that happened in reflection that saw past the literal as to what was really happening. So you see, when you applied that, even in small dimensions, you saw hidden motives in almost every action that affected the action. So you saw that people were choosing for freedom, but still fighting for control, or they were doing. So then inside the wording, you saw slippery little things that when you read them finally and you saw what was happening, you saw they were dishonest. And you saw that politics was a kind of manipulation of the dishonesty in some way, of still maintaining a power over a situation while releasing some. And it would be also what they would do to the children or the structure of anyone in that situation, that they would that you find out in a moment that you are being manipulated. When you had a trust in, so in seeing the manipulation, something shifts in you because you had a kind of trust. You didn't read the fine print, so it became normal for you. But then you read something in a moment, or you see something or experience something in a moment, and it says, no, no, you're contracted into this whether you like it or not. And then somehow you may have valid reasons for not liking it any longer, but those valid reasons make you stupid.
Yeah.
That you signed the contract as your reality.
Yeah.
And so you see, then hold it. How the hell is this? So that somehow you start to see the play with how the inhuman play. That even in caring for the ill becomes a business, where the keeping an illness going by treatment becomes the reality. You know? And so then you start to see what once had a genuine element in it. And if I studied in medical school or this, I would have had a genuine interest in the human experience, okay. But then once you got into the literalness of paying the rent and this and that, even with medicine or keeping it together, then you also saw the accommodations that you made into a business. So at this point in time, you see the literalness of the action then creates inside oneself a longing for something very simple that's happening. As one is becoming dehumanized, there is a longing for a human experience within them, or for a genuineness. As one is experiencing the illusion for one's experience, then one enters into disillusionment or delusion first. And so I feel that we have kind of brought into a situation some elements where the life has a creative dimension that is reached in retrospect. And retrospect means that one doesn't own the story of one's life, but you get a glimpse of something that anyone else could have seen, but you experience deeply. And that's why I say, you know, reading the diary of a parent or something like that, or discovering a parent as a human being, primarily, releases the story from its literal context. And you see how many factors went into your life, not as your possessive life, but how many factors influence your life from people who viewed you and saw you. And you could see the dialogues that happened, an absentia by a look, by a situation, and you see the hidden life. And you see that there were some feelings that people shared that were genuinely shared because of who they were to each other. So that instantly, no matter what the screw up or whatever, they had access to each other again because that experience was pre-existing. So when one comes upon the many ultra-dimensional aspects of life, then it's very much like seeing a series of movies by the same director or writer, where you see the thread of their situation running through the different expressions there. And you see then in retrospect the movie of one's life or the creative dimensions of one life. And that some act comes into the story that gives you a choice. Hey, baby, do you want to do this anymore? And you see then it's your life, not as a possessive, but yours to work with. And time is different. It's more a relationship to living and dying than it is to the literalness of death.
Mhm.
And in some of the movies you see even at the ending, somehow the memory lives on. And they leave you hanging with a little thing that there will be a future in the story or something. So then your life starts to assume those qualities, not at the expense of the literalness, but the literalness doesn't possess the story any longer.
Yeah.
And so I felt, oh, there's Carrie now. So, hi, Carrie, can you hear?
Hi, Danny.
Okay. You're in the car. So I was positing in my own dumb way that your minutes with John and my minute with John resembled my minute with my father, where they weren't crazy or this or that. My father then, I saw sanely decided to let go.
Yeah.
Hmm? But because of the people around you, where that's built not to happen, they kind of had to have their own little clique of friends or something like that that looked out for each other in a situation. And even the nurses probably looked the other way and helped them where they may not have been legally able to do. They may have been creatively part of their situation, which was to look out for each other. Hmm? Where it was like a place of a home of creative people.
Yeah.
So then I felt that again, I was asking John whether he wanted to hang out or not,
Yeah.
and this and that. But it was not so much the literalness, and he seemed to answer. And so, not to overschmaltz the story, but from my perspective, the schmaltz of the story is the main part of it means the human aspect of it. Santa Fe Anonymous is calling. Should I answer that? Santa Fe Anim.
What's that?
Oh, that's Mary, Santa Fe Anim. She hung up, Santa Fe Anim? Yeah. So I guess Mary was trying to reach us. Maybe she's in New York trying to get on. Are you calling her back? Yeah. So what do you say while we're visiting living and dying, and it's so obvious and it's naturalized, and you spend the period of time there, and even before that, without literalizing it, you spent this time period with John where living and dying was happening in the moment. You saw the grace and the hurts and you witness to the story. It's a remarkable thing, this life, or a weird thing?
Yeah.
Is it too weird to be remarkable?
At times it seems weird, but I think it's pretty remarkable.
Let's say you re-enter the story. And let's say there's a creative expression waiting for you 10 minutes down the road. It's about to happen. Okay. Should we create an accident?
Yeah.
So now, with John gone, is your life in flux?
Yeah.
So somehow John gave you a sense of continuity in the situation.
Apparently, yeah.
But even when it went up and down, if you overstayed. Yeah. So let's say the up and down was built into the story. when it became, when it was, because it was a creative story, and whenever it became literal, meaning dependent on this or that, then there would be some incident that would happen. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing fine, actually. I mean,
Look, you're deepening your work, and deepening your work is in seeing something. You see what you created. It didn't literally
Yeah.
exist. It didn't literally exist. That's why the family wouldn't give it literalness. It didn't literally exist. It's like as if you were a girlfriend on the second floor.
right.
Then all of a sudden he was with his girlfriend on the second floor when he passed, and now the family comes over there and the girlfriend wants to be there. And come on, get out of here, man. Okay.
Yeah.
So you see, the family would want to possess the story, even though he may have told everything to the girlfriend that he never would have said to his family.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see then that the girlfriend, the imaginary girlfriend that we have here, saw a dimension of John that the family never met.
Yeah.
And so then, and it doesn't translate well because they may have had a lot of fights and arguments. They don't want to hear that John was maybe a person or this happened or that happened for them.
Right.
So they all have a memory of who did what to each other. So if you bring home a question, no, he was really Jesus the Christ. He wasn't just a, you say, come on, get out of here. He was this, he did this. He stole my mother's money or something like that. You know, some kind of story like that comes into it. So you see the history takes away from the mystery.
Right.
Hmm?
And maybe both were true, you know?
And when the mystery meets the history, it sees another dimension of the experience. And that's why I say when the mystery visits the history of the situation, you say, holy shit. Because then you see all the dimensions of the story in front of you at once. But you also see each person. You see a woman who was a mother who was a woman, and yeah, the identity both, and you see what kind of access you would have to the person's inner working. So you see that one would find out about the mystery, the woman who was a mother, the motherhood was a kind of a mystery to the person who knew the woman, who happened to be this.
Yeah.
What happened to be was secondary. The friendship was primary.
Right.
The child's relationship is primary. That she's a being besides that is interesting and this and that, but that is translated into the motherhood. So to discover the being is to discover something that looked like it was constantly hidden in plain sight. So you discover something in the neighborhood that you're in that everyone knows knows your story except you. You heard about it. And in retrospect, you make a discovery. And that the neighborhood itself was a computer to some extent that had all your information without you knowing it. And they would look out the window and see you as you when you were to be discovered yet by you. You didn't know that that was the you that you were, that they saw. So when you discovered the you that they saw, it was a shock to your system. So let's say somehow, are you okay with the happenings? Even though there may be some things you go through that you had privately,
Yeah.
where there can be in reflection, should have, could have, done it, you know. You see all the should have, could have were hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
But you also see that I could never even come to a point, and he was supposedly loved me so deeply that I couldn't grab him by the head and say, John, stop the shit now, snap out of it.
Right. Yeah.
But I say, no, the broken heart is written into the story, and it's around the lost love. And it may go back 5 centuries for you. But still for us, the love is not a possessive. meaning that you can't, in our family of friends, you cannot exactly be a rat bastard when it breaks up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I say, why? And I say, because you understand that something, we're sharing a human experience. So basically, the normalcy of people will be to hurt each other in the breaking.
Yeah.
But but when you look at the normalcy of the hurt, you see how complicatedly brilliant it is. At the same time, it looks natural or stupid or dumb. You see the attachment to it is not exactly stupid.
Hmm.
You see the attachment to the hurt is remarkably complex and brilliant. It works the story. It creates an instant simpatico in a circumstance. But then the reflection on it allowed you to see a life of theater. And you see that your presence was essential to a kind of hurt that you received, because there was some pressure in you towards an experience. You want the job, Kerry. And as you're driving around Northern California now,
Yeah.
looking for an accidental moment. How was the
Yeah.
occasion? How was the occasion of with Reed and everyone, Derek? John's
good.
action.
Yeah, it was good. Beautiful. It was a nice sunny day all day, and everybody spoke. It was nice to see people who, new students of John that we hadn't met before, and mixed with the old, and see how John touched everybody in a similar fashion. It was nice.
Kerry, were you there then?
Yeah.
What did you feel?
Yeah, I felt similar. Thought it was pretty beautiful, and we got together afterwards and talked some more, and shared some stories and music, and had a good energy to it.
And how was Reed?
Reed was cool. It was nice
Yes.
to meet Reed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting then, isn't it? What do you think, Derek?
Yeah, it was nice to meet. I'd spoken with him a couple of times on the phone beforehand, and so in person is nice, different kind of energy. So it was good.
Yeah, I think he was absent from my life for 40 years.
He's a sweet guy.
Came back into the story again, and he had always been you would call good-hearted schmuck. Like it would take this, like they made of Bernie, a shirt off your back kind of guy. But actually that represented something in the Samaritans, I told you, and where they were people who would see someone else as themselves in some way. Just as you would see your children, or so, that you would take your shirt off your back for your kids to keep warm or something. So it was second nature to them now. It was normal, but a whole population could not grasp that as being normal. Couldn't grasp kindness as normalcy, not as something that you had to study or this or that, but that somehow, the many factors you had available to you. Not one of them. You had hope. You understood if you were writing it, you can use hope when necessary. You can use trust when necessary. You can use loss, despair. All of those may be driving elements, but none of them own the story. From the perspective of the creative act looking into the story, you have these elements available to you. So let's say the complexity of the complexity of your relationship to John would be very weird, literally, if the cops walked in on you and said, "What the hell are you two guys doing here?" Okay.
Right.
And you say, "Okay." But yet there's something gracious in a kind of looking out for the other's life while they're betwixt and between in this at a friendship. And then out of the friendship, you make a style around it. But then you also see in the intimacy that you share, that intimacy is usually hidden from someone else. So you may have an argument in the nighttime about something very stupid, but then when a student comes in, he has to say, "Oh yes, how are you? How's everything going?" At the same time, he's really pissed off with you.
Hmm.
The person may say, "Where's Kerry?" And they say, "Well, that little fuck, you know what he?" I say, "Oh no, Kerry went to buy some non-gluten bread somewhere." Like that. Okay. So then you see that somehow what is remarkable, a person can turn this switch off, that station on, this one, keep this quiet, expose that one. What a remarkable thing a human being is that is so creative, can have 10 stories going on in the brain at one point.
Yeah.
Can fight in a war and come back to a family, can do operations in the afternoon and then play with the kids in the evening time. And have somehow balanced this whole weird reality where living and dying is natural. And yet living is the one predominant force that's happening for you and caring. You wish it to live. And so any elements, any smell of dying is sniffed out and gotten rid of. But at the same time, you may go to a world where living and dying is the norm.
Mm.
And it's not contradictory.
Yeah.
Because there are stages of access that you have. When it comes to a science like medicine or whatever, that you have access to something that most people would dread or run away from or hide. But you also experience the horror of it when it happens to you or your family. But when you're taking care of patients and you have to advise them of something, and what is the something? Is that you got something that size running around in your body. You understand? And it's pissed off about something. It's a Trump. You got a Trump blob in your in your body, and it's pissed off about life and everything. And I say, oh, "Come on, I don't want to go through that." They say, "No, some of these cancers are very Trumpian. They get angry because you don't give them any credits. You don't give them any recognition. You just want to get rid of them." And you say, "Hold it, can I walk into such a crazy world where somehow I have to give the so-called villain, the cancer and all that, I have to give it credit and give it a life, not make it a villain so much. But see then that the life is not so much owned by me. You see the drama of the cancer, what it brought about in the story. To some extent, the cancer brought about a deeper dimension of relationship and experience between the beings, because then there was a recognition that something deeper was running through the relationship than just a happy time or something, but there was a being there for. Immediately, then you understood that vows didn't mean literally vow, because that couldn't be a vow. It had to be true. If you were to be there in the dying, if you were to be there in the living, somehow it couldn't be because you had to or you were forced to. It somehow had to be a wanting to. That there was another dimension of experience in the dying process with a lover, with a friend, that you shared. That was not, but as you shared it, they were having the experience of it. You were sharing the experience of it without the going. So then you retain the whole experience that you shared with someone, as Urja will do as a doula, where you're a friend in the experience. And so therefore you share the depth of the experience without the literalization of it. So then that becomes the reality of death, is memory, not the literalization of the form, but memory. And I think memory is a sort of conversation with another dimension. When it's free from being owned or literalized or possessed, then it's revelatory in some way. So at the same time that you were sharing a movie with John, you made it a living. You literalized it. So if the cops came in and said, "What are you doing?" You said, "Oh, I'm a caretaker, and I'm as if you were a normal citizen." Hmm? And he would, yes, that's all. No, he would have said, "No, he's not. I don't want him anymore." He would have embarrassed you. So let's say, what the hell experience have you just been through? All these, okay, can you? What's the philosophy again?
I like the holy shit philosophy.
Well, it seems holy shit only because you seem to be. How about fool for love?
Yeah.
And then all the variations of fool for love. So let me see how many faces you would have to put on to truly be in the Hall of Fame of fool for love. Do you want to try that role?
I've been trying it in some ways, but
Now,
I can't do it as a role too much, I guess.
well, role meaning that there has to be an invitation to some degree for you to assume the, okay, because then
it kind of is right now, but I'm kind of exploring the depth of it and not literalizing it, and it's a challenge, but
no, why not see that it does literalize? Let's say you have to go to a play tonight. What's the name of the play then, Urja? Little Woman, should we call it? You're in.
Okay.
So you're in the play Little Woman. So from the little woman's perspective, you're merely a guy, a character in the play to bring about some situation. So let's say you run in and you do your role. And that was to be smacked by someone, to kiss someone, to cry over something, to laugh over something. But it's kind of 5-minute increments.
Yeah.
But the show is more around the people that you're meeting. And you're visiting their story. And somehow there's an invitation. But somehow you represent yourself a creative act, not less feeling or not, but not a possessive in that sense. But somehow your affection for each other can create a home. Somehow your affection can create a looking out for each other. Yeah. But let's say now we've come to a part in our own immersive that sort of whatever we do is kind of we're doing it now. Not so much the devil's making us doing it, or the history is making us do it, or the landlord's making us do it. But somehow there's still a kind of creative voluntary space.
Yeah.
They say, "Hey, baby, you want to give this a shot?" And you see the complexities of it.
Yeah.
You see that you're writing a play. You see that you're inviting people and yourself to see if they can share a genuine feeling.
Yeah.
In a world that's coming from hurt, and in a world that's coming from so many reasons and has so many underlying motives, can there come from a health? And health doesn't have to mean athletic competition, but a healthy, hey baby place. You want to try this thing. And even in that small, you want to try this thing, you see how remarkably creative that what one would have to almost live and die and come back to be able to start a conversation as if you were started walking into the world. And the whole dimensions of it. But it seems to me that that's how you've done it. Schmuck number 8, I would say, but schmuck number 8 is not exactly stupid. Somehow, your life has been more theater than it has been literal. And so then you'll find yourself between acts, between situations, where you can do it, you can get out of it if you wish, but you don't know if you're compromising something. Or whatever the creative element is. So then you'll find yourself in creative challenges that are not stupid. They're challenges that are true challenges. you understand that if you go into the situation, there is a kind of commitment being with, or a responsibility. Doesn't mean to carry a load. It means to respondere, to be with the energy that it's inviting you. So it's not a how to. It can give you directions in one sense, but it's not so much a how to. Literally, you kind of almost have to make the screw up to find honestly what's happening. But now it is also, even if you're alone, it's an I and thou world that you're moving in.
Yeah.
You see that the aloneness as you're moving through the world is intimately, deeply connected in many ways.
Yeah.
And the connection doesn't always have to be literally.
Yeah.
It may just be the hello and passing by, or the familiarity of a situation, but there's a human thread being exchanged. And you see in the relationship, there is a human thread being shared. In a world that's becoming increasingly artificial, it seems, the intimacy then assumes a larger picture. But from the perspective of love, the difference between the falling in love and that being the expression, and the loneliness being being in the world as a commodity in the world, as a seller of things in business and everything like that, the loneliness that runs through the story, when it literalizes in relationship, in effect, to get rid of that loneliness, you see that loneliness was much more complicated than merely not being with someone or this happening. It was very much about the life that you were living. But there's also a longing for something true in a world that's becoming increasingly artificial.
Yeah.
And true doesn't have to be only scientifically explored. It can be an accidental hey or hello or this or that, but somehow not coming from such a motive of continuity primarily.
Yeah.
So you see, whenever you meet that experience and share that experience, something special is happening. Even if it doesn't go any further than that, there was something clean in it, something pure in it. So somehow in the everyday life, you visit pure. Accidentally, you visit pure. You see that somehow in your life now, there's a pure thread running through it that has in fact affected your life. It makes you dumb in one sense to the literal world, but makes you attractive and lovely in another dimension of the world. The same thing that can't get a job that easily, can be falling in love that easily. So let's say we are meeting ourselves in the world, in relationship. And when I see you, even though I see you in whatever situations you're in, I feel if I was in that the same perspective as I said, do you want to do Urja? And I said, okay, now I'm Urja. I said, holy shit. Okay. So if I had to do anyone that I'm seeing, I would experience, from my perspective, being them. I don't know how you're pulling it off. Okay. Because I would not know what button to touch or something like that, So then I would say, I see then the complexity of what is normal for you. And as we interact, we experience through our interaction more the creative dimensions of our life and the humor of the literal dimensions when seen from the creative of what is actually happening. And you see then the John experience has normalized into your life. Life is now going on, but the experience is still hanging out with everyone. Hey, John. Okay. So let's say there's a John that you're carrying with you, and it may yell at you soon. Okay. So I say, hold it. Can the spirit of John still get pissed off? I say, yeah, I think so. I think the spirit of John can, if you make the wrong turn, I think he can So, yeah. So there may be a prayer I can come up with where John won't, the angel of John won't get pissed, but there is a movie that's really weird. That's an old movie, and it's called Angel on My Shoulder. Have you seen that? Where the guy dies and he goes to hell, and the devil makes a deal with him to come back as this judge. That the devil is pissed off with this judge and wants this guy to come back and screw up the guy's reputation and this and that. And so the gangster comes back as this judge and falls in love with the judge's wife and wants to be human. And he forgets being gangster, so he tells the devil to get lost, that he's fallen in love. And, it's a very interesting old movie.
Mm.
Devil on, I think it's called Angel on My Shoulder. Yeah. But let's say that John transforms into something else. Now, I don't think it, no trip, so you won't be able to, it's only an evocative angel. It may yell at you, but even then it's a joke. And the yelling is because he would accuse you of being obstinate about something. That you had a philosophy, right? What was the philosophy again? So let's enjoy John's passing. His passing through us in our life, in our memory, in our feelings, in our reflection of certain holy shit moments, looking back at situations that seem so easy in retrospect and so difficult in the moment. How the story can literalize, become a possessive, how a person can carry that, and in fact, how it's built that way through history. You see almost all history is a carrying on of the stories of who hurt who and who did what. And you see the experience that you've just been through. When the premise was music lesson. And you see, Kai, you also, how was it advertised? Music lessons or? How was it?
I actually have a pretty funny story around that, Danny, because I was looking for a new spiritual teacher. And I also wanted to take voice lessons from a black jazz singer. Black jazz singer. And John looked black in the photo. So
No, he used to be called Black John when he
so I thought he was the black jazz singer I wanted to take lessons from. So I went, and his address was 1111 Pine Street. So, and 1111, of course, was a spiritual number.
Yeah.
And then the first day that I went there, he said, "This is my teacher, Danny." So.
Oh, really? Yeah. Because the 1111 is one of the reasons that we got the place. Originally, I think, holy moly. And so that set off this. And no, it also set off in me because basically there have been around 10 different situations in the journey. So when I see a reed slipping back into throwing John's ashes, I don't think that was a parallel world, but they had never met. And so then that reed then comes back into the life, into a situation, just online, and we share this, and then you meet him, and there's a literal situation. I see the story unfolding and interacting and recurring, and what, like you said, where you call someone from 27 years ago to say, "I'm sorry, baby," or something, and release this, and the story was released, but it had to come from a heartfelt, because somehow it can detect if you had a motive.
Yeah.
So that somehow it has to come from a heartfelt that instantly release the story and then allow the person to see themselves in the situation. So in instant, holy, for all these years, something is out, and I say, no, that's time is only one factor. There's creative time. There's spiritual time. Spiritual time can be 1,000 years, or you may read something about a spiritual life from 1,000 years ago and all of a sudden see something that's happening to you in the moment. So you see that time is shifts to insight or to perspective. And so as that is released from time, you see that people who have passed from the body are not gone any more than if they're not in the room with you, then they're gone. They're gone, but they're not gone at the same time. You know that there is a logic in the world and they still exist. But if you find out that something happened and they don't exist, then you experience, a sorrow, you get close to, oh no, where their existence then and their non-existence, they're lost and sends you to a place just by hearing one little thing. The normalcy of absence is gone. And that place that is kind of waiting for that moment in your body, in your being, is awakened. And you see that somehow you have holy shit moments waiting in your body and in your brain. And you can almost identify them as you're going through your day. But you start to see that basically an event happens that throws you for a loop. And was inherently written in the story. The only thing, it had to be true. It affected a part of you that you couldn't protect or hide from or do anything. And you saw your relationship to the other was not the other. There was an I and thou happening in your life all the time. And there is an I and thou happening in memory, in experience, in dreams, in absence. In fact, it seems to have a world of its own, that you can access it only in a certain kind of pure way. And pure doesn't mean woo, spooky pure. It means actually true. That the desire is true, no longer is a possessive. And you see that there is, so I liken it to the other side of the mirror looking in, or the 1,000 pieces of a broken mirror where you see, when you see your reflection in it, you see 1,000 yous, all of them being you, none of them being you. And so you can see in the broken mirror, the story of the journey. You can see all the identities, but you see none of them equal you, that there is somehow a hidden you, a magical you. And it's not sneaky you or hidden, it's hidden in plain sight. You come upon it when the literal world collapses or dissolves. And you come upon it when, in fact, there is a feeling that allows you a thou, that kind of surrenders the ownership of the story. So you see the ownership of the story has one singular element, and that's survival. But the survival element diminishes the other dimensions of life into dreams or thoughts or this or that. But in fact, when one perceives deeply, you see that dreams are an actuality, not some kind of distant thing that's happening to you, but very much a part of you is dreams. Very much when you discover the senses from a creative perspective, you see very much a part of your living is based on these senses. And when you lose them, you discover a profound loss that even allows a deeper expression for you when you experience profound loss while the world is going on without you. Because then you see there was a whole dimension of humans without this experience going on. And you see how much the senses meant in your creative life. And how they constitute empathy. That if you can taste or smell or see or hear, you have a relationship with the human condition that's very different. So when the survival sense in the human being or in the culture is so strong, it becomes competitive. And when it becomes competitive, then the enemy becomes enemy, dehumanized. having less characteristics than the other. So we walk in a world where we can't identify literally with any of the historical identity. Your relationship is with the human thread that runs through the story. So it's kind of ahistorical. It's not driven by its history. It sees the creativity in its history as a mystery. That people had the experience. They were people. And you meet your parents, you meet this, you meet them. You meet them as people who are doing parents, people who are in the military, people who are doing this, but they're people. And our relationship is first with the human and then with the story they're in. When you touch upon the human in a moment, then your access, it's a shared story, not a literal one. Because in your friendship, you are then bringing the friendship into the literal story that the person is in, and seeing it from the friendship, it has a different element to it. It's as if a friend viewed the story. So a friend viewing the story from an affectionate place may see violence running through something that's normal in the story. So then when I would come into a picture, when I'm invited with John and others there, I would then see the energy running through the story, but as it became a possessive, it became a denial of the energy in some way. And so therefore, the thing that you were looking for in John was looking for in our relationship. Holy shit. I just put almost 50 something years. I don't know how the hell I woke up one morning and I fell into this story. But holy shit, I'm thinking maybe more than 50 years I've been involved in this. What the hell is going on here? Exploration. Do we have any answers yet? What do you think, Derek? What's going on?
No
Any
conclusive.
Any conspiracy we can buy?
I'm sure we could manufacture plenty.
I wouldn't mind one. I wouldn't mind a conspiracy with a straight face, but it does seem holy shit is closer than anything else.
Interesting how you don't realize that it's holy shit until it's holy shit. It's holy shit.
Is anyone else on here?
Yeah, we have people online. We have John Kowalski, Sophia, Jason. That's everybody who said hi.
Okay. I hope this is kind of understandable that we're kind of employing an immersive, meaning that everyone in the one is explained in the theater or it's explained in making the film, that whatever level the person, whether they're the plumber or they're the queen in the movie, you'd like everyone creatively to be on board with the creative act that's happening. So we've experienced friendship with each other to some degree where we've seen that most of our literal life has been a creative act. And so we kind of meet in a creative act where experiences are seen from that perspective. So Kerry just had a literal experience of being there for our friend John who passed away, and then Derek and Joan then entered into the story. And from our perspective, from a friendly perspective, we were able to then to see him off in a way that was connected to our friendship with him. But that meant literalizing the story, family coming into the story. But from our perspective, what we shared between ourselves was the creative dimension, almost the movie aspect or the creative shared space that was there. And then the story literalized. So we have been talking about the dying and living process as actually happening to us normally. And that while one is living, one is dying simultaneously. And that is for all things that have taken shape or form. that there seems to be a simultaneity of living and dying. Even this table is in the form of living and dying. And the molecular nature of it, the atomic particle nature of it, the literalness of a human life going through its different phases, but the different phases are reflective of the living dying process that's happening in the body. And so then you see that there may be in the, when one awakens to one's life as a journey, then you start to see different aspects of the journey experience in different times in your life. And then you see the quest in one moment. In retrospect, you see when it was a life of quest. You see when it was a life of interaction and assimilation. And then you also see at a certain point when you're looking it from the other side of the story, looking into the literalness of the story. And that everyone was attempting to find the creative dimensions of what is this life. And you see then from the other side of the story looking in, and I use the reflection of the other side of the mirror looking into the literal reality. But for the other side of the mirror, the literal reality is a very small aspect of what is happening. The happening is what is happening from the mirror's perspective. And the mirror then sees dimensions of the so-called reality hidden in plain sight. And I feel that the conscious dying sees what the mirror sees. It sees the mystery overcoming the history. And as one's attachment to the literalness of one's life, you see the mystery of existence. And even in medicines and hurts or whatever, you see that you've been attempting to take something that will keep you conscious for this mystery that you're in, while you're kind of literally dealing with the history that you're in. And so you see your body does represent the journey to some extent and the history that you've gone through. And so the aches and ups and downs of through it are pretty natural for the life you've lived. But the life that you've lived is not only the life that you literally live, but you have access to other dimensions. So even in the small thing of remembering and feeling and releasing the story in a phone call, you see the remarkableness of parallel existences and how they're not only literally related to the body's existence, but somehow memory, all of these aspects are deep dimensions of having been through this life, that somehow you've entered into it for the memory of it. And when it becomes the memory of the experience of life, it's no longer your possession. You see that you entered into the form to have the experience. And almost everything, when you see it from that perspective, you see almost everything, every screw up, everything was brilliant. You were in it to have the experience of this life. Every aspect of it. About nothing. It doesn't need a reward or a literalness or that. It's about nothing that human beings can understand or hold on to or whatever. The depth of it can't be captured literally that way. You experience the life as an angel would have experienced living your life. They would have had the experience specifically how they would have loved to have had that life that you've lived. Do you understand? How they would take it in a moment, even though there may be moments of being a drag. And I'm not creating a feel good because feeling shitty is also part of the experience. You want the human experience, but the human experience as a creative act, as a pure act, not so much as an attachment to the story. So in my stupid mind's eye, Kai, you flew into Pennsylvania, you did your thing. That had to come to pass. As a remarkably free person. And that somehow, Mary's in New York. I'll hear from her soon. We'll see how she's doing. Is she really in New York? Okay. So let's say I'm living in fantasy, existence, literal existence, they all seem to converge. And the normalcy that we just shared with John last week, where we normalized it. We just normalized this whole experience that we shared with John into a boat trip with Reed. Okay. We made it our thing. Would you agree to that, Derek?
Yeah.
Now, do you think John would have agreed to it, or he would have complained about the boat?
I think he would have been okay with the boat.
No, he told me he gets seasick. Years ago. Okay. So shall we give our dear John a continued life in our feelings, in our humor, in our dreams, in our schemes, in our conversation?
Mm.
Hmm?
Yeah.
As kind of being second nature, that the story somehow is integrated between us. And we share something. It's not laid out what we share, but it does manifest at times through interaction. But somehow the sharing allows a creative space for the situation that you're in. That somehow our shared space doesn't allow the situation you're in to literalize. So let's say that it was becoming a job for you. You had to have that experience. You see in retrospect, almost all the experiences are programmed into the story. That they're forcing a dynamic. And that's usually when you lose something, you find something that was hidden in plain sight. We've normalized our everyday. In losing your everyday, you start to see how remarkably creative it has been. So once you have access to what you are doing normally, you see the normalcy is in fact a creative act. But the shedding light on it introduces another dimension. When you shed light on it, it is no longer driven by the history. You're no longer driven by family in that same way. It's more poetic than it is literal repetition. So perception interrupts the repetition of continuity and has you as a partner in your own existence for a moment. When it's not around survival or living or dying or whatever, but you are just there, like your body is there, like your being is there for the life that you have. Now you say, does your body have a dream of a future you? Does your knees have a dream of a future knee? Does it? So let's say you introduce your body to certain kind of pains and you find out what you are doing anyway. You are creating a future neck through treatment. You are creating a future nose or future this or future. So let's say that in the process of living, there is a future you inherent in the story. As you. So you remain you somehow, but you are you looking out of the story and seeing different elements of it. And you see that there is a time when there is a you that is kind of literally irrelevant. And you see where the system is, in fact, when you see the irrelevance, you see the system is getting rid of you. Although but you have to buy this and you have to buy that, but at the same time, you're being sent off. And you see that there are entire systems of dealing with things where there are entire populations that they're letting go of or confining. So you start to see what they are kind of already know, that there is all kinds of trips behind the story. They don't even have to be conspiracies anymore. But then you also knew that it was corporations fighting that war in Afghanistan for 20 years. It was Black Hawk. It was this or that. They had more, the corporations had more fighters on their side than the army and the military had. It was a business. And it was a business that made a business of war and maintaining war and structure and whatever. And it was an interesting article in the Times about that, how thoroughly, or in our local paper, how much of the war was fought by Black Hawk and these corporations. And then they revealed how much of the prison system is in fact run by corporations here, not by the government or anything. And so you see it business. And so then you see there's an aha motive where it had what brought a beauty that America, the beauty that was attempting to bring beauty and feeling to people were captured.
Hello.
At the same time was America, who was a make-a-buck phenomenon. And so then you see the intuition that a guy will have about this screwed up government and its policies and what they want. And I can't fault any of it. I'm not a joiner this way or that way. I'm not, but you also see, once you start to see the motive of continuity written into the story, that all power seeks to continue. And they
That's
seek
not really even my motivation, Danny. It's more just, it's not even about the government.
No, I know it's not, but you'll visit that, but you'll find out information from time to time.
Yeah, I try to ignore it, honestly.
I understand, but
And then people say I'm burying my head in the sand, but
so they're right. So let me look at you. How do you look when you're trying to ignore it? Vaccination, 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 vaccination. You know, I think
love and light, love and light, love and light.
I got a call about 10 days ago from Sweden, and it was Ingmarie sitting on the couch with Evan and Louisa from Italy were visiting her in Sweden.
Nice.
So then they're coming out of the Italy was hit hard, so they come out of mask and really doing. Ingmarie was on the couch, not vaccinated, with them. They slept together in the same room. They got a hotel room that night and the next night. And so then I was saying to some degree that I agreed with her, you know, because she also comes from a culture out there in Sweden that's not so quick to do this or do that. And I said, you know, it is for you to make your call and see it as it is, but then the others are vaccinated. And then she says, vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. Everyone's talking about it. I didn't know that they had such feeling about we were having a good time. And then all of a sudden, okay.
Exactly.
I said, okay, she had to meet her daughter at the airport. I said, okay, I'll catch you later. And probably her daughter's going to come back and start yelling at her to get vaccinated. So then you saw I may have to call her again and see how she's doing out there, because she was doing okay living on this space where I guess there's just retired people and they're just friends with people that you know or whatever. And most of them are doing their own thing out there. But then they brought the city into her life in that conversation. And then the question that somehow she was putting off was then being thrown at her. So let's say head in the sand, right? Okay, that's true. I'm doing head in the sand. Why am I doing head in the sand? Because it doesn't speak to me. Okay. Do you want to stay with that?
Yeah, I don't see my head in the sand, but I don't really care how they see me anymore.
Well, let's say they put it to me then, since we have that situation ourselves here. What kind of schmuck are you that you have a household of people and you have, are you crazy? Don't you know what's going on out there, Mother Jumper? And I said, you know, I thought it was pretty sweet what we had. You know what I mean? That somehow people were looking out for each other, and even around the so-called vaccine scares and situation, they were still looking out for each other in some way. Okay. So there was a relationship to a larger picture that other people had or whatever were bringing in. But at the same time, if the cops came, you would see how we were violating all kinds of we should be doing this or we should be doing that. Obviously, Segway is a spreader of the virus. And I say, but he doesn't have it. He says, he's still a spreader. Just by his nature, he'll spread the virus. And I say, are you telling me about a whole different scientific theory that people's personalities are actually the spreader of the virus? That the virus is so smart like that and that it's looking for certain personalities? So let's say one can be a schmuck, one can be a genius. So you're still into what you're doing? You feel
I
it's
mean, I'm into the movement forward. Like I said, we're going to visit California in a month, so that's nice. And
well, then it may be like Mary visiting New York, where you then look at how many people are walking around, what they're doing, how it is. And so you'll be assuming a kind of care anyway. Because it's, let's say for us, then it's a hidden factor in the story that's making people conscious of each other. So it may be reactive consciousness, but all of a sudden you become conscious of a person across the street, or conscious of how the person is doing or whatever. I think that that there's more of a mystery than the history in the virus, in some sense, that it's kind of making an awareness happen normally of people's lives. So then it's also making, I think, collectively, people much more aware of the humanization that's going on, where they wouldn't have cried over the people from caught up in these countries trying to flee and this and that. All of a sudden you see things that break your heart or touch you or that are happening around the world. And you start to see the human element being touched by what's happening. So I don't know that it's limited to do or don't. It is limited to a truth that you're involved in, that something speaks to you clearly. And it's not so much the self as merely the medium, and not the owner of the story. So I think that you've navigated through the form and you're still caring for it.
Yeah.
And
Penny, I actually have to go make dinner for Tico. He has a class, so you guys are welcome to stay on.
yes. Well, I'll say goodbye in a few minutes. Okay, say hello to Tico for me too.
Okay.
And take care. And maybe I'll see you Sunday then. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You okay, Kerry? Are you parked or driving?
I'm parked at the moment.
Everyone, Derek, anyone else well, I guess everyone else is gone. How are you doing then, Derek?
All is well at the moment.
And Joan, everyone liked the ceremony and appreciated it?
Yeah, it was sweet. We captured people speaking about John on video, which was nice. And so.
Oh, who was that? Are the students of his?
Yeah, Joan did, Carrie did, Brian Teal. I don't know if you ever met Brian Teal. Hillary spoke a little bit. I did, but I didn't record myself, so I don't know if I even got captured. But it was good. It's been nice, and it's been nice to connect with the students and all of that. So
yeah,
Shivani as well.
Shivani,
And,
oh yeah, that's good. How's she doing?
she's okay. She's been working for a while and now, and she's also into the cryptocurrency stuff, which is,
She is.
yeah.
She must be pretty brilliant then.
She is. Her brother too is really steeped in that world, so she's kind of has a direct plug into it.
Is she advising you?
We spoke a little bit about it earlier, but she's like, I don't even want to talk about that stuff anymore. So she's
really,
yeah, she kind of has it on the side burner of it. But
well, you did read that article, didn't you, in the New Yorker about that fellow then, the scammer?
Oh yeah, and that was a good one for sure.
That was important.
Yeah. I would say the majority of the cryptocurrencies out there are basically what he's talking about, where they're just trying to.
But basically, we also talking about there's now a kind of neurosis that seems to come with the Bitcoin, which is having to check on it all the time, like your telephone.
Yes.
And having to check on it all the time seems to have created its almost own reality.
Yeah, there's a dynamic. It seems to be this. I've seen graphs of an S curve where this adoption curve, where we're kind of at the base of this S curve, and it's kind of similar to the internet when it first came around, and there'll be this shooting up and then a leveling off, and at some point it'll just sort of be the new. At least that's the theory, is that it'll be the new monetary system that people operate through.
Well, it seems that it is a monetary system already now.
Right, but in terms of adoption, like worldwide adoption, is still pretty small.
Yeah.
Like 2.5% of the world's population.
So then basically but then it will become more legitimized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. That's coming. More and more countries are adopting it as legal tender.
Yeah,
So
I read that.
it should be interesting to see how it all pans out.
Okay. I'll see you then tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay, Kerry, you're okay? Thank you. And Urja,
Yeah,
things are okay.
Thank you.
And folks I can't see, take care. Nice for you to hang in there.
Thank
We'll
you.
see what else it brings us. But these are normal conversations to me, but around a kind of creative life that runs through it, where one assumes an identity in the circumstance. But somehow I was asking about this Bitcoin, that's creative use. Now, over the years, art has come my way, things have come my way that have value in time. And I have always related to it as Bitcoin, that somehow it allows you to be free to explore certain things or whatever. And so the literalization of Bitcoin was not something I was interested in, but I was interested in the dialogue with folks, which kind of brought me into a world, but I also felt excited, some folks that were visiting at the time, into possibly exploring it. Now, most were turned off by the fact that it uses so much fuel and electricity that is in fact a bigger polluter than everything else. And that's kind of hidden in the story, that you're doing a lot of damage somehow with Bitcoins, especially guys with a lot of Bitcoin.
One thing you notice is that you don't really hear that narrative so much anymore now that the big banks have gotten into it.
It was in New York Times mentioned it yesterday, I think, but you can look up information about it, what the reality is. And they say it's remarkably a lot of pollution. So that the Bitcoin, from their perspective, was not a relief of the current problem in the world now with the climate.
What causes the pollution?
Do you know, Derek?
Well, the way that the blockchain operates at all is it requires thousands of computers processing simultaneously each transaction, and it requires heavy computation. So it just burns a lot of energy. And in efforts to forestall that narrative, I've seen a majority of these miners, these Bitcoin miners, work to find alternative sources. Like in El Salvador, they're utilizing volcanic energy, and it's clean and it's reusable, and it has less impact on the system.
But as they're doing that, because as it is now, hidden in the story is a remarkable impact that it has.
Right.
It's one of the biggest polluters.
And so I guess the one argument I've seen against that is that the mining of gold is.
Yeah, no, I understand what it's replacing, but basically what it is still not clean.
Fair enough.
And possibly if that's introduced in the beginnings, that if it's more polluted than the other things, it's not as valid anyway. If in fact if it's also the new coin is going to contribute to the global crisis, then it seems to me to have the same trip going for it. So the one thing about Bitcoin, it was not owned by corporate structures, it was not owned by governments, it was not owned by, but it was a free exchange going on. Now, of course, a lot of hustlers enter into that story. And especially if it's literalized by these corporations again, where they start to possess it,
Yep.
and have the same motives with it.
Right.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, it was an attempt to somehow be creatively free, not sneaky, not this or that, but that create a kind of separate reality that was not so subject to government laws and rules and this and that, but that was what people would have done if they lived in a neighborhood and they all shared together. And they, one's crisis was the neighbor's crisis also. If your house burned down, neighbors were concerned about it. So somehow the neighbors looked out for each other in some way. That was normal to them. So somehow there was a neighborhood that was created, I thought, by some Bitcoins, which were not Bitcoins as sneaky, but were kind of a shared experience, a shared expression, a shared experience. But for us, I feel that the primary thing would be a fluidity of income flow.
Mhm.
So that the literal survival was not the dominant factor, but one of the factors in life. But that the life was somehow released, that you discovered in the release of one's life, the creative dimensions of that life. And that somehow something we shared in relationship was a release of the literal story. Where you saw that lovemaking was more sensuality, where the sexuality was co-opted by the society into a given and owned by them. The sensuality was an exploration of the being, of the relationship. Out of the sensuality, sexuality may come. That means falling in love introduces you to an expression that you're both into somehow. But you see the persuasive factor of continuity and need and loneliness continues the loneliness through the form. There's a difference between consciously visiting loneliness and being stuck in loneliness. Where in fact you are visiting creatively aspects of what it means to be alive. And you see that there are certain things that happen in relationship that affect dimensions that are hidden in plain sight, but that you carry with you. The relationship is, again, some aspects of it, the deeper aspects are an I and thou, not as a possessive, but somehow something that you've shared is deeply still in your life. And you intuit it, but then an event happens that reveals the memory of it. So you have an intuitional relationship to memory that has many dimensions to it. But then there is a moment when you reflect on the life and you see that memory that you're having, the intuitional memory, is in fact an actual dimension of the experience. That there were observers in your life that were not in the story, but that you meet years later, that there was a dimension of you observing the life that you were in while you were doing. There's an aspect of you, and that aspect is there in your dreams and your memory and your this. You see the aspect that was silent in the experience remains silent until a moment happens when it reflects. And you see that there have been many dimensions to your life that have been hidden in plain sight. That interrupts the story from its literalness. So, and it releases the story to an expression. I feel to some extent, especially with Carrie and the literalization of the story. I feel it was ironic that it would be a Derek then that would talk to the family after Derek being one of the main characters having troubles with John. Then Derek becomes the main, we need a white guy to talk as if he knows what he's talking about. And Derek did it pretty well. Or did you need? You needed John though, right?
It didn't hurt.
Well, if John would have said, get lost, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, the image of Joan from the initial probably helped some.
No, if Joan would have said, get away with Cookie and leave me alone with this, right? What has it got to do with Cookie? So let's say the humor of it is, can you see the experience? And can you see it had to be voluntary? And you see where people who would never have volunteered themselves so delicate into the dying of it, into the loss of it so deeply, all of a sudden it was natural.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you had people coming in saying, and I remember when John used to do it, and he taught me, and all of it, the only memories of John were affectionate. And you couldn't say, that mother jumper scared the shit out of me when he would. And is that part of the beauty also? Is
Yeah,
that
there
part of
was some stories of the explosions that were.
Yeah, no, but then I say no.
We were,
Did I not know the explosions were happening from where I sit when I'm talking to you? Okay.
of course.
Did I not know? I put myself in the space. And I say, holy shit, what you're doing normally, you're not seeing the dimensions of it. So when you enter into the story, it's transformational. And it was only about a transformational energy. Even all the experience were kind of written into the story. This was going to happen before it happened. And you could see then that John would make certain decisions, or that would put you in a quandary. Hmm? Well, it put me in a kind of quandary because I also saw that the people would resist, would hold on to elements of the story when it wasn't around awakening. But the possessive of the story denied what it was really about. The only reason we were in that room was around awakening.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that happened, that you made money, you were happy, or you shine your shoes, all of that stuff was secondary to the thing. Even all the fights, arguments, displays, situations were based on something creative. They were not literal.
Yeah.
Hmm? And you could see where people would resist the seeing, hidden in plain sight. How brilliant it would be. And what I remember then going into the apartment, and John was in the other room with everybody in there that he was talking to. And I think there was something going on around that time, or something that was difficult, or seeing something that had to be seen. I don't want to mention names, but I think it was maybe an attachment to someone or something like that. Or,
Mm-hmm.
I seem to remember Elliot being there too, and Elliot's friends from Israel or something, the packed house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, boy, oh boy, what do you say, Derek? We have experienced a lot of weird things, no?
That's for sure.
You still into it, or you want to give up the ghost?
Yeah, no, it seems worthy.
What do you say, Carrie?
Still,
Now in your now
the
this idea still of coming out here and helping in the pot, and well, we would have to let Teresa know that you were coming. Is that okay? Because
sure.
don't want it to be accidental or this or that, or
Yeah.
it's not be so it's a voluntary, so if it would be awkward or something like that.
Right. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want to create awkwardness.
Now these folks carry guns, and we wouldn't want them to shoot you.
Yeah, that's true.
The story of you, they may say, that mother, let me shoot. That's what. No, it's the kind of creatively I felt that people are into it because they're into it.
Yeah.
and not sent up or something like that. So then I just mentioned to Mary that they have that conversation, that folks may be coming to help with the pot. And then Segway then brought up that these guys who worked on the helping out there, they saw the plants out there, so you may have people coming to raid the house or something. So I don't know, but I think that
I can help you be a tough guy for a minute if you need it.
well, Segway has now assumed that role. It's remarkable that he's watering everything out there now. He's coming in. He's the front man to this or that. He's giving advice. Or is he making a move? I don't know if he's making a move. I think he's talking with Rafi about maybe turning the store into a pot hangout where people come in to listen to some music and get stoned and sit on couches. So I said, it doesn't take that much brilliance to create that. I think most of the place, they must have a lot of those in California now, aren't they? But can you actually smoke in the city itself outside? Or
Yeah, as far as I know.
Well, I think it's coming to that here. You know, have you seen the plants? I don't know if I can show you on the computer here. Should I try? Should I try to show you? Huh?
Yeah, if you have enough Wi-Fi out to that direction, you should be able to.
Well, no, we're still going to be 300 feet away, but
Yeah.
let's see if we can see it.
You may drop out if you lose connection, but
If I lose connection, I'll see you on it tomorrow night.
okay.
Okay.
Can you see out there?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
see those trees out there next to the building?
Yeah,
That's the pot plant.
it's enormous.
So they're almost as high as the building there.
Wow.
That's the plants back there. Then you see everything else. Okay.
Huh.
I'll see you
Thank
tomorrow.
you, Jenny.
Take
Bye,
care.
Jenny.
Oh, who's that? Pad 2, who's that?
That's Urja.
Urja? Okay. Bye-bye, Urja. I'll see you.
Bye-bye, Danny.
Take care.
Thanks, Danny.
Bye-bye. From the door.